Good morning.
Good morning.
Work against the ongoing colonization project of indigenous people. As a former union organizer with International Ladies Garment Workers back in 1976-77, thank you. At the onset of the earlier days of the neoliberal agenda, I saw firsthand the demands of textile, clothing, shoe manufacturing industries with the increased rise of general trades and tariff agreement. And these are the sunset, quote unquote, deemed as sunset industry by the government then as the largest employers of immigrant and racialized women, particularly in the GTA area. And finally, the FTA, the free trade agreement of US and Canada, nailed the coffin, final nails in the coffin. Then the manufacturing sectors, folks, particularly in Hamilton, will remember Inglis, one of the earlier ones in 1987, right down in downtown Toronto, that shut down and affected over 700 steelworkers members. And then in the last round in 2008, global financial crisis, I was involved in the plant, one of the largest progressive auto parts manufacturer up in the city of Vaughan, just north of Toronto. It's called PMP, Progressive Molded Products. And overnight, without letting any of the workers know, the company filed for protections, bankruptcy protections, causing 2,400 workers losing their jobs and being owed over 30 million in terms of severance and termination pay. So you see the fragmentations of the production process just kept on going much faster. And the neoliberal globalization agenda has been an intensification of exploitation of workers, reducing workers in the globe, across the globe, into a flexible and disposable workforce. It's a race to the bottom, as we all know it, with the growth of temp work as a new norm, and the integrations of both local and foreign migrant workers as just-in-time labor. I'm not sure whether it's just in terms of, this was in the Toronto Star, the headline in the business sections, saying, finally job growth streak continues. It talks about 6.2, finally, Canada, we have a lowest unemployment rate of 6.2%. However, in the small fine prints, it also shares the statistics that the growth, most of the growth are in part-time jobs. With 110,000 more part-time jobs, but at the same time, 88,000 fewer full-time jobs. Those are the numbers that we don't get to know, and I think this is what's happening with this round of NAFTA negotiations. This week is the fourth round, and the seventh and final round will be in the week of December 4th. So far, as is in the past, the public has been kept uninformed unless you read, quote unquote, the business sections until a final agreement is reached. I think part of what we're seeing, and I think we all have referred to that, bilateral and regional free trade agreements, free and quote, have served more as a corporate bill of rights. The IMF, World Bank, and WTO has been dubbed by the scholars as the unholy, quote unquote, trinity, agents with its tools to serve the corporate masters. And I think at this point, I'm going to just raise a couple of the principles on what we should see, what we should frame as a fair trade agreement. And maybe that will also take into some of the lessons, some of the challenges in terms of building transnational solidarity. And to me, transnationalism refers to relations across state borders. But for me, when we talk about transnational solidarity, it should refer deeper into including how do we engage workers from global south and global north across boundaries. Boundaries not just geographical boundaries that have separated always by our equity-seeking groups, by our own experiences. And I think in that sense, the global chorus that said no to corporate-led trade agreements had been brandished by its powerful opponents as, oh, we're anti-trade, we're protectionist, and both of which are misnomers. If anything, the so-called anti-globalization movement should be more accurately defined as by its pro-development, pro-justice, pro-sustainability, and pro-democracy spirits and values. And I think it's important that we refrain, instead of just saying no, saying what we stand for, and continue that discussions and continue that dialogue. And I think for us, the principles for a fair trade future, from a labor perspective, should be able it elevates before, to say no, but saying no in a way, framing it in what we as workers, as the working class, needed to see. I think first and foremost, it's recognizing, particularly for us in the global north, recognizing that globalization has followed a history and has been part of the history of colonialism, of militarism, and of slavery. So in that sense, and I'm referring more in the Canadian context, when we talk about envisioning what a fair trade future should be, it's to first and foremost respect and protect Indigenous rights. If we take heed to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's, TRC's recommendations, free, prior, and informed consent from Indigenous peoples should be required if their rights are affected by government decisions. And given that many generation trade agreements are encompassing, it is likely that they will impact Indigenous rights. So in this sense, these agreements must uphold the maximum protections for the rights of Indigenous people in compliance with the UN declarations on the rights of Indigenous people as its highest international standard, especially in the case of foreign industries operating in Indigenous land, territories, and water. And I think lessons for us in the trade union movement is how do we engage in that mutuality, in that partnership that goes beyond just acknowledging Indigenous land at the opening ceremony of any union conference. How do we do that in a way that would create and envisions a just transitions in terms of the new work? 2 minutes only. Then the other piece, I think it's important I'll just highlight the inclusiveness. As Biller and Lindbergh has said that maybe it's time for us in the global north, particularly for trade union movement, to understand and challenge the imperialist world order and its link to globalizations, particularly also within the Iranian hierarchy. Mohanty has also argued that we should examine the world system from the perspectives of the least privileged groups, such as women in the global south, as the most inclusive way of understanding the injustice, opening, as her quote, opening up the space for demystifying capitalism and for envisioning trans-border social and economic justice. And I think it's no strange to all of you that women and girls carry out 2/3 of world labor and receive less than 1/10 of the income generated. So in that sense, the new transformations of world order within the labor movement, both within the society and the labor movement, can be not from the core workers in the developed countries, but more from those who have been most marginalized, say domestic workers in the informal sector in the global south. Let's flip that around and see what it would be like. To me, I think what Angela Davis has said is that how to extend that, deepening that global solidarity, we actually need to revitalize our labor movement and challenge our own hierarchy within our labor movement. We must bring to the movement, as she said, jobs that have traditionally not been part of the movement, jobs that have traditionally been considered as women's work. And in that sense, exploitation should be looked at not just as a class-based phenomenon, but also linking with the inequities, inequalities of race, gender, and disabilities, and religions. So in that sense, I think it's more just to remind that when we talk about racism, talk about religious freedom, when we talk about gender issue, it's not a distraction from the more pertinent material conditions of class, but rather race, as Stuart Hall has said, race is one of the most important keys, not into the margins of the society, but into its dynamic center. And finally, I'll just close by saying that if we take inspirations from the founding of the International Domestic Workers Federations in 2013 with the support of IUF and other large trade union global network, it's the first global union federation to be formed in many years, the first one ever led by women, representing predominantly women membership. I think those are resistance, those are inspiration for us to follow. And in that sense, I just want to put forth another idea, is that maybe when we talk about labor transnationalism, maybe at the local level, at the national level, and again global level, we should start building more movements of labor, where structure can include not just those who work regular jobs in the workplaces, but that would include temp workers, casual workers, part-time workers, workers who are not even maybe at this point included in the informal, in the formal economy. And I think that, to me, that is much more liberating concept of building a mass workers movement, both in the global north and global south, where workers, regardless of status, workplace, union affiliations, can come together and workers' power is built from the bottom up.